An historic meeting in the making. President Trump last night saying that it could be significant or nothing at all when he sits down with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. A time and place has not officially been set yet, but the meeting is expected to happen by the end of May this year. Meanwhile, the White House says it wants to see concrete actions from the North on its nuclear program ahead of any direct talks. Joining me right now is House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy of California. Congressman, it's great to see you.
Well, thanks for having me back on.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to get to with you this morning, but let me start off with these talks. A huge gamble with a communist state that is hard to read. What are your thoughts on this meeting between the president and Kim Jong-un?
My first thought is the way the president has handled this is correct. A lot of people didn't think that. He played rougher with China and rougher with North Korea. And there are risks, but there are greater risks not to have them. They're closer than ever before to be able to have that nuclear weapon and that ICBM to be able to hit the United States. So time is of the essence. But I think what has happened, the number of sanctions that we have passed in the House, the pressure that the president has put on, he moved pressure that the carriers off over there. That is having an effect, and I think it's right from this perspective of where this president's going. And remember, no sanctions are coming off, no change, and the president is saying you have to denuclearize if you want anything to happen.
Yeah, 1 year ago he said fire and fury.
Yes.
This country will be met with fire and fury if they make a wrong move, and it does feel like that tough talk was effective.
And the president is very clear. Yeah. He's kept all options on the table. He cannot allow, from the perspective of Kim Jong-un, to have a nuclear weapon that can hit the United States or to proliferate and sell that everywhere across the world.
So do you want action before the meeting? I mean, they're not going to denuclearize before the meeting.
No, but they're not going to have any more tests. But I think we've got to continue to keep the pressure on and just put the pressure on China as well to make sure this needs to have a change.
Let me move on to another subject here at home. We've got a big election coming up this Tuesday, the special election in Pennsylvania. Do you view that as a proxy to the midterm elections?
I don't view it as a proxy because if you take that perspective, there's already been 5 special elections and Republicans have won all 5 of those. Oh. Now, this is a little unique situation because in Pennsylvania, what the Democrats did, and this is really Barack Obama and others, they've gone and they politically redrew the lines. So whoever turns out and wins in tomorrow's election, they'll no longer have a seat right there. They'll have to run someplace else. And I hope the Supreme Court takes a look at that and puts a stay on this position of redrawing these lines politically. But in this race, the intensity level is a little higher with Democrats. But if you look at everybody in there, the low propensity, especially on a special election, if everybody turned out, we would win by 10 or 12 points. But this is a very tight race going in. And the number one question should be, do you want another person added to Congress that's going to be another vote for Nancy Pelosi to become Speaker? Because that is what she's doing around the country. That's her desire to be able to be there, to go back. And what did the Democrats propose just last week? 2 Democrats proposed cuts that have spurred our economy's growth and raised the taxes on you. So that's the real question come tomorrow. So everybody needs to turn out. And Rick Saccone, not only is a veteran, he's an expert when it comes to North Korea. He would be a great addition in Congress, and he'd help us in a time that we actually need the help the most.
The president has been saying, look, we need more Republicans in the House, in the Senate, because we need to get these policies passed. Now Nancy Pelosi's walking back the whole crumbs statement, saying, oh, we all like when people get bonuses. But do you think that hangs over the Dems come November?
Well, I think
comments like that?
It does, because when I go across the country, Andy Barr was telling me a story where he went across doing a listening session. There was a guy in Kentucky who says, I'm getting $50 more a month. That's more than $500 a year. And all on his own, he says, you tell Nancy that's not a crumb from where I come from.
Wow, yeah.
It's the respect and honor, but the way she treats people. And the thing is, not only does she think they're crumbs, she's going to repeal the tax bill. She's going to raise your taxes. And tomorrow, people have an ability to say no to that.
Going into the November elections, you have the wind at your back. Certainly the Republicans with the tax legislation passed, the rollback in regulations. But now we have this issue of tariffs. 100 of your colleagues have sent a note to the White House, to the president, asking him to rescind these tariffs on aluminum and steel. Where do you stand on this? Have you spoken with the president about it? I mean, this is an issue that has divided the party. Got everybody from corporate CEOs to the Wall Street Journal editorial board talking about this being a bad idea.
Well, we've talked to the president about a lot of this. And it's not unusual to hear the president say this? Because he's been saying it for 30 years. He campaigned on this. And from one perspective, the president will say, I campaign and I'm trying to keep a promise. But it also shows the president's listens. Because look at what the final version came out. He gave exemptions. So Canada, the person that we import the most from, exempted. Mexico. He just said Australia. It could be our allies. Because the real problem here, the president is correct. China produces the most and aluminum. 49% of steel, 53% aluminum.
But not direct, right?
Not direct, but they subsidize it. And they're flooding the world market. That is a problem. Now, we only take 1% in. So this really is a message to China by giving the exemption and others. Nobody wins in a trade war. I believe in free and fair trade, and I get concerned about this, but I think a lot of this discussion and what's happening right now has a little more to do with NAFTA, but also think the pressure that it's putting on China when it comes to steel and aluminum when you're trying to have a negotiation about North Korea. I think it may wake them up a little bit.
Going into the Pennsylvania special election, the president's going to rile up all of these people who are right in steel country. So it was the timing, obviously, not a coincidence, I guess. But let me ask you about the China story. We're going to speak to Peter Navarro coming up. What do we do about China? Because you've said it, Paul Ryan has said it, you'd like to see something more surgical. Is that what you mean when you say surgical, that you want to see something direct against China?
Well, if we're going after China, let's not punish our friends.
Right.
The other point you have to remember, too, there's thousands of more jobs that manufacture utilizing the steel and aluminum than those that actually make
exactly.
the steel
6.5 million jobs of those
It's 5% of the GDP when you're doing less than 1%. So that's a fear. That's why you do not want to get in a trade war either with this. And that's why they also allowed the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, to exempt products as well. So there's a lot of exemptions here, and I take that as the president's willingness to listen to us in Congress and listen to business, because we've got an economy moving like we have not seen since the 80s, and we're beginning the America comeback. And I think this will actually, from the point of having the exemptions, help us in some part and make sure we do not get into trade war.
So what can you get done before the elections? I mean, in the next block, we're going to talk about the school safety bill that's moving in Congress, as well as these great economic numbers. Is there anything you see getting done before the November elections, aside from that? I mean, what about, like, for example, would you expect a new NAFTA deal within 20 days before the Mexico elections?
I would like to see a NAFTA deal done now.
Yeah.
And remember, it's just not America that has to do it, Canada, Mexico as well. But this is what the president's trying to get done and make it happen now. Opioid reform. We did the CARE Act in the last Congress, but you're going to find the mortality age has dropped twice in the last 2 years in America, on the verge of dropping a third time. This has not happened in quite some time. All regards opioids. Infrastructure, rebuilding our infrastructure. So
without Gary Cohn, you can get infrastructure done.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And then think about the punishment, as you know so well, of Dodd-Frank. The ability for capital, for small businesses, especially those minority-owned businesses. This is our ability to reform that. We've passed a bill inside the Choice Act in Congress. The Senate is proposing as well. This is only going to build on the economy to go further.
All right, let's talk more about what you're going to get done in these next 6 months. Then there's this, the FISA story. Will there be a special second counsel appointed to investigate the alleged FISA court abuse? Congressman McCarthy is back for more on that after this short break. Welcome back. Attorney General Jeff Sessions stressing confidence in the ability of his Inspector General to investigate potential FISA abuses. This despite growing pressure from several top Republicans to appoint a second special counsel to carry out this investigation. We're back now with House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. And we want to be clear here. This is the FBI going to the FISA court and omitting important information, like the Democrats having paid for the dossier. What do you want to see happen here?
I want to see a second special counsel.
You do?
And I want it to be narrow, but I want to be outside the Department of Justice. Now, I have the greatest respect for the Inspector General. They do an amazing job. The problem is they will not have the authority, the subpoena authority, to really do the investigation. So when I look at this, the letter from, and I give a lot of credit to Chairman Goodlatte and Chairman Trey Gowdy, they sent a letter to Sessions, and his comments back were very positive. He said out of the respect of those two, he's taking a serious look at this. But take for one moment what just came out in the New Yorker just a couple days ago. Christopher Steele says he knew that the DNC and Hillary Clinton were paying for it. In the FISA application, the FBI said they did not know who.
So they lied.
Yeah. And how can you have a trust? Now, FISA court is different than any other court because you don't have another attorney in there to argue back and forth. This is going before, and this is surveilling American citizens. We can never make a mistake at this. Yeah. And I think there are enough questions, enough actions, out of the Department of Justice because there's current people sitting in there who actually signed these FISA applications. Let's make sure we have accountability, let's have trust, let's narrow it, and let's get a special counsel.
I'll tell you, Congressman, this really looks like an abuse of power. Are we going to see any accountability? I mean, is anybody actually going to get prosecuted for any of this?
I tell you, what we're walking through, and we want to go through the rule of the law. People are innocent till proven guilty, but there are so many questions here, and the more that we dwell into it, the more we get, and we have to pull the information out. I mean, what's so embarrassing to me and offensive to me in all respects, how many times have we asked the FBI before for this information, and they sat there and held it instead of giving it to really, we are separate but co-equal. We have a right to know because we are the voice that the power is lent to us from the people to make sure the protections and accountability.
But what do you do? You've been stonewalled since last August.
Well, if you notice, we never stop. We continue to move forward. That's why the special counsel the idea is coming out of the House. 2 sessions, and I'm hopeful Sessions makes the right decision here.
Take us through the school safety bill. A lot of people talking about the fact that it doesn't include an age change. You know, there's not really any more pressure on gun owners. What is the school safety bill? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, remember what we have, and we got to take a step back here. So back in December, the Congress actually passed the Fix NICS bill. And remember what NIC is?
This is the background checks.
Yeah, the National Instant Criminal Background Check. Because when you go back to the Texas shooting, Mr. Kelly down there, he never should have been able to have a weapon because he was dishonorably discharged for actually beating his wife. There were 2 offensives there that he never should have been able to go through. But our own military did not update it. So what we're looking at is updating, making sure these bad people cannot have guns. That is sitting over in the Senate. Now we're adding to it this week. We have a former sheriff of Jacksonville, Congressman Rutherford. He has stopped school violence. This is more for schools to identify these individuals. Because look what the FBI did with this last shooter, Nicholas Cruz. 5 months prior, Nicholas Cruz goes on YouTube and puts in he wants to be a professional school shooter.
Right, and that was missed.
That was sent to the tip line of the FBI. They did research and said they couldn't find it. They never called YouTube. Then later, a family member called in concerned because his cruelty to animals, his recent death in the family, the way he was acting towards guns. They went back in and looked, knowing that they had just been given it a couple months prior, and then closed it out again. Both of these incidences should have never happened. We need to start enforcing what we have, but more importantly, we need to make sure the background checks are updated, and that's the bill we passed in December, and now we're adding to it with Stop School Violence. And the bill we're passing this week, the Sandy Hook Promise, they endorse this bill as well.
Do you want to see teachers armed?
I think from a perspective, not force teachers to be armed, but if somebody has a concealed carry permit and others and trained, I want to see it. But more importantly, what I want to see if someone's given a tip that they're able to see it. I want to see that we prevent people that aren't supposed to have guns from getting them. And secondly, when I look at if there's a resource officer sitting on that campus, I don't want them hiding. I want them protecting these children like they're supposed to do and what they're hired to do.
And I know you're going to have the Judiciary Committee have the FBI come in and explain why these failures happened.
We just had the FBI, and they're calling them in again. They're looking at all these incidences because they should not have happened. Where is the failure? We got to make sure we correct it and find a solution.
A word on the economy, good numbers Friday.
Not just good, but great.
They were off the charts. I mean, it feels like a Goldilocks situation here. Not too hot, not too cold, because wages were up, but not as much as people thought.
You know what? When the president named it the Tax Cut and Jobs Bill, and when he cut the regulation, what a difference it makes from one new administration. The administration working with the Congress, all those regulations citing in these tax cut bills. Look at the numbers on these jobs. The number of participation. For the first time, we had 800,000 moving in. Look at the skilled labor. If you look at the skilled labor of the manufacturing, we have not seen these numbers since 1984. The best 3 months before. This is really making the difference. This is the beginning of America's comeback, and we want to continue that going forward.
Let me push back and say to you, this is not a mandate to spend more money, right? I mean, you just voted $300 billion in new spending. A lot of people wondering, where did the fiscal restraint of the Republicans go? I mean, is that going to cut into growth? What's your solution for trillion-dollar deficits?
Well, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, because we've been passing these budgets and balancing them. Where we made the investment in the military. And rightfully so, because what had been cut for the last 8 years, looking at North Korea, looking at Russia, looking at China in the South China Seas and other, where we had to make a difference. But what's really grabbing all this money, and if you want to go back to 1984, in 1984, the mandatory spending only took 25%. That's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt. You know what it takes today? 69%.
Yes, I know that.
Congress acted.
We
made a reform in Obamacare. That's a whole new mandate that Obama laid on us. We tried to reform that. Unfortunately, we lost by 1 vote. That's why tomorrow's vote is so important. Do you want Nancy Pelosi back, where she's going to raise your taxes, expand more when it comes to spending, and that will actually break Medicare, it'll actually break Medicaid. We're protecting it for the future, but more importantly, making our economy stronger.
Real quick on technology, you mentioned YouTube. These companies have never been this powerful. Are we going to see new legislation, a bigger bite of regulation on the tech companies?
Look, I believe in the First Amendment, but think about this. When you're looking at how much Facebook controls, how much Facebook has on what you actually see, and when I'm looking at what's happening in knocking down conservative voices, I think this is what's happening in Congress should actually look at and make sure we have really a fair process.